And this is what we need in Auroville. We need this to bring this deeper sense of, and to activate that spiritual touch and spiritual presence. Yes. We know each other from before, because, and I was just mentioning the previous times when Doudou, Diène and Marc were there in our the advisory council. It was a moment of hope. It was like we could do something. It was like a feeling that finally we arrived at some kind of agreement, some kind of, collective. And then somehow things went down and down. Maybe it's just in the whole world. You can see what is happening in the world nowadays. There is less and less trust, more and more darkness rising or something. Maybe the supramental is pressing more and the darkness is rising from below. So we have to deal with this situation in the world also. Just look at Ukraine and Russia.
I was telling Vladimir that what is happening in Ukraine, we have it in Africa every day, and it's okay. We face it. Right. And in Asia also, Myanmar, all this very violent crisis, people dying, suffering all over. But when it happened in Europe, it is the center of the universe. Yeah. Nothing else is happening else. We are very sensitive and to what is happening in Ukraine, but we also are very sensitive to the whole world, what is happening also. So, but I think it is a step in the untightening of the knot of World War II. Something is changing, and the changes are always painful. It is interesting what is happening now. Don't forget Afghanistan just a few months ago. So don't forget Palestine.
And Syria, and Syria was such a huge crisis. We had today a beautiful session on Auroville. You have to listen to this, Miriam and Dina and Manoj. It was so enlightening. People were so delighted. You have such a potential, such strong people in Auroville who could really work with you and do this work of the mother. They are there, really, you have a good team. I must tell you this, that good support, real team. And what I was thinking, we don't need reconciliation. We are thinking, some people think about reconciliation all the time. We need a victory. It's a fight against our lower nature, which is claiming its place in the future. It wants to endure and survive and have its place and have its role. And this is not the place. Auroville is not the place for that indulgence and for that stagnation. And I've been to Auroville 27 years, and stagnation, I saw how it degraded slowly from the higher ideal, where higher ideal was justifying every possible indulgence. And then slowly the whole thing somehow degraded step by step from 2014. It's as if something starting to rise from below. And if Auroville would conquer this, then it would help the world. I believe so, at least. I believe that there is a nucleus of work, some kind of important work. Yeah.
I'm a bit more optimistic. I think they have broken the Gordian knot. When we were working in Auroville, we felt a lot of pressure. And it took us a lot of time to understand why and what. And we still don't know, but I feel something is happening now. I'm not perfect. Nobody is perfect in politics. Nobody is perfect. So I don't say I agree with everything, but la construction est commencée.
You know, just Mark, I want to add something because I don't agree with Vladimir when he says that something is degrading. There is no degradation, there is evolution. Evolution is not a highway direct, you know, and evolution is small ways, hurdles, bad herbs, etc. And this is all these are stepping stones to something else. So I'm not pessimistic because you started and concentrated on Ukraine and Russia. And I was telling Vladimir about what's happening in Ukraine. We in Africa, we have it every day. I mean, some powers intervening, especially European powers sometimes, or Americans. I remind him of what happened in Afghanistan just a few months ago, terrible. I remind him of what is happening with the Rohingya and in India, etc. But you have something else. And I think that this is when I think Aurobindo spoke about evolution, and me in my own experience in UNESCO and the UN, because I have been working the last 10 years on human rights, investigating violations of human rights, terrible, you know. And I see that behind every violent event, something, it is always an opening. It is a stepping stone to move, transformation, mutation, construction. I think that is what is important. When we are challenged by things which we did not expect, but when we have highest values and some guidance, moral guidance, we face it. It is the way we face it, the way we try to settle it, the way we move. This is evolution. And I think just I conclude by saying that for me, why I'm so attached to Auroville, 50 years, you have a group of people, men, women, children, 50 years, you know, typhoon, surf, all problems. And in fighting inside Auroville, so many crises, etc. But you are building something. People have got out of Auroville, came back. So I'm so happy and delighted by Aurovillians. I mean Aurovillians, I think they are the treasure of Auroville, is that they're very profound belief in the ideals of Auroville. And despite everything, material, moral, everything, they are still trying to build things. And this is something I very much admire and like very much. So I think that what is happening now in the last few months is one step in that long construction.
Yes, with Édition Ariane in Montreal, we came to Auroville with Marc Vallée, and finally they came out with a book about the oasis de lumière, a bit everywhere in the world. And there is a small chapter on Auroville. And this book is very spiritual. And they announce, after 2022, la construction d'Auroville va commencer. The construction of Auroville will begin. I don't know how they know, but that's what is written in the book.
I too am a diehard optimist. So even if there's, you know, if you show me, my friends would tease me when I was in college, and they say, even if you see something which is completely, you know, which may seem offensive, you'll find something nice in it and try to. So I think the silver lining has always fascinated me rather than the dark cloud. But here, nevertheless, when we look at the ideals that the mother had envisaged based on Sri Aurobindo's teaching, and actually, instantly, I've also been last few days very deeply trying to read the 5 dreams of Sri Aurobindo, which he uh, gave as a radio broadcast. I mean, he didn't himself speak it, but it was one of the radio announcers who read it out. So thereby he talks of unity, freedom we had just got on that day, but he talks of freedom and unity for India. And then, of course, he talks of a resurgent Asia. And then he talks of the spiritual gift of India and also of how world unity to have a nobler, greater, brighter world. And finally, but I think the key to it is about that individual transformation and the next part of evolution, so that we're not just beings which are guided by the mental, but are able to raise our consciousness, the fact that we just discussed. And then I've also been trying to read other essays, and especially the human cycle too, where it's a very beautiful, where he actually talks of this idea of a critical mass, where he says that it's therefore in the spiritual change of which we've been speaking, he says there are 2 conditions. He says there must be the individual, and the individuals who are able to see, develop, recreate themselves in the image of the spirit, and to communicate both their idea and its part of the mass. And at the same time, there must be a mass, a society, a communal mind, or at least the constituents of a group body, the possibility of a group soul, which is capable of receiving and effectively assimilating, ready to follow. I mean, I'm quoting him here. So in that sense, I feel that this connect with Auroville, the idea was to create a place where people are not bothered. You don't have the usual encumbrances that living in a normal city, a normal town, a normal place, because the rest of the people wouldn't understand it. And that's how this was conceived of, as a special place where they can come. And yet, the reality today, I mean, I would say that it's far from the vision. Of course, we have a vision, thankfully, it's very clear, even the city, and it was supposed to be really embracing, inviting people from all over the world who had this aspiration, of course, maintaining the diversity. So if I was to request both of you, in the light of your experiences here, and Vladimir, you've been living here for a long time, so you really know where the shoe pinches and where are the possibilities. So what could be, if we said 2 or 3 simple steps that you feel would take us forward in realizing this dream of a city?
I think you did right in trying to stop and to neutralize the negative forces in Auroville. There are not many, but they are. And we did not succeed. When we were there, we did not succeed. Nous n'avons pas réussi. 1. So this is not an easy process. Second, Madam, you are the first General Secretary of Auroville Foundation as a woman. Remember what Aurobindo said. Aurobindo said, I'm giving the ideas, I'm giving the direction, I'm giving the concepts, but it is the mother who will give birth, who will enable the coming, the construction of the ashram, of the school, of Auroville. And remember that Aurobindo said to the mother, I will die. You remain close to my body for 72 hours. And I will, from where I will be, transmit you all the work I have done into my body to you. So in a certain sense, Aurobindo has transmitted the best of the best of his work to her. The image I have, excusez-moi, madame, but it's that you are a bit in that process. Aurobindo and the mother are giving you the energy to enable Auroville to finally be built. Il est temps, it's time.
That Auroville is in the world. It is in India. So it is highly important that what is happening in Auroville, this very incredible, without precedent experience of human unity, should not remain in a ghetto, that Auroville is a ghetto, kind of laboratory or an ashram. That the opening of Auroville to the world in two ways. One, making Auroville known, better known, what is happening, the process, complex, success and failure. Information to the world on the existence of Auroville, the success and the failures and the interrogation. So information on Auroville, opening of Auroville, information. Secondly, I did try, when I was there, to link Auroville to Africa. I realized that Africa was absent. There was no Africans when I came, except our friend from Ethiopia. And I know simply that because the Africans are not informed of what existence of Auroville. Europeans are informed because of the people who came, who share the newspaper. So what I did was, and I am sticking that what I say opening to the world, not only the opening of information, but sharing Auroville advances and the successes with the world. Auroville is a concept, ethical, spiritual, philosophical, but Auroville is realization, putting this concept and values in practice for the betterment of human beings. This should be developed and shared with the world.
You see, as secretary, you have to be the voice of Auroville, but sometimes it's not just the voice of that majority. As Marc, I think both of them gave the answers, that there is probably the negative and the positive. I mean, we have to be all embracing, the yin and the yang have to be together. But for some time, there has not been necessarily this voice of all the people, those that really, sometimes the people who are more of sadhaks, more of people on the spiritual paths tend to be more silent, more patient, tolerant. But then a time comes when we have to be a little more courageous and ensure that the ideals for which Auroville was set up, of course, everybody here is incredibly good, but sometimes, as he said, we need that little critical assessment. And also the fact that as the secretary of Auroville, not only should one be the voice of Auroville, but I understand that we to be the defender and advocate of Auroville, but Auroville as enshrined in the vision or the reality today. So we have to, be a defender and advocate of the vision of Auroville, because the reality today sometimes it's far away from what it was. Not all across, but that sometimes tends to be the element that doesn't allow governance, transparency, accountability, participation in a right. I mean, so that, and of course, freedom to Auroville. And I think on that, I would also like to share that over all these years, even all the earlier governing boards, etc., I think phenomenal freedom had been given, but possibly that freedom has not percolated to every citizen there. And freedom in the sense that Sri Aurobindo mentioned. I mean, again, freedom not for our own, interests, our own egos, anger, hatred, things that perpetrate misery, suffering, but to raise ourselves, the true idea of freedom too. I fully hear what you're saying, and also the fact that Marc Luyckx mentioned that we have to, like you had tried, I think that moment, il est temps, as you said, it is time probably for that, for all of us concertedly trying to stop the negative forces also, and possibly a shift in the approach, the more of the yin, the feminine force. I think, and that mother too gave a lot of, she actually the ideas, the ideations of Sri Aurobindo were actually transposed on the ground with Mother. So in that spirit, all of us collectively have to come together, and Auroville can certainly do it, as Vladimir also mentioned, the kind of people, that the teams that have now emerged. I mean, it's very heartening. But nevertheless, the task before us is not a very simple task. It's a complex task. It's an enormous task. Of course, we're all committed to collectively take it forward. The dream weaving, for example, is one instance of how this has happened. We're also engaging with the Citizens Assembly to see how governance measures, economy, and getting back that central core, whether we call it spiritualization of everything we do, whether it's governance, whether it's making pots, pottery, or whether it's aquadine or satprains, and everything, to do it with that raised consciousness, and get it back for all of us, because sometimes something which we set out to do, sometimes that may just have slipped a little bit from our hands. So of course it's a sadhana that each one of us has to do. So we're trying to look at these three core areas and engage with the Citizens Assembly.
When you are inside Auroville, you see something else. I cannot speak about outside, but from within, what I saw all the time, I saw that first, people who built the forest came, these, people of the forest, of the land, hard work, hardships, kind of sun, water, these basics, fundamentals. They did the whole forest, they built the bases, the ground. Now, these people, they have their place in Auroville. They are the foundation. And this foundation resists the next stage of building walls. The foundation wants to maintain itself already as it is, because it found itself there in some form. So there is always a conflict of these generations. One generation went, the another generation comes, and Mother didn't mean for this place to be a forest, though she wanted a forest around it, and it is very important to maintain it, and these people really deserve their place, but they are only one part of it, like farms also, like afforestation, water conservation. These are great achievements, and nobody says that they are not needed, or they are important and they have to be emphasized, but not only. Again, the complexity grows. The Mother envisioned this place of knowledge. Where is knowledge? Why consciousness is not really kind of yet established on the mental plane, that people could understand what is going on, could choose freely, and that part is quite lacking in a way, and even resisted by the whole community, especially those old comers. They just resist this. They don't want the university there, they don't want the studies, they don't want these outcomers come from some university students, unless they bring money, of course, to their own guest houses. But this is all this small village mentality which has to be broken in a way. This I saw it so many times. Your neighbors know about you better than you know about yourself. Everybody knows everybody. It's a small village. It has to grow into the city, or even into the world city, something bigger than that. And this idea which you started with multiversity, this grand idea, I think this is the beginning of widening the scope of, and Auroville is to interact with the world. So the best what I could thought of would be Mother's guidelines. This is actually what we unfortunately we didn't follow in many, many ways. We spoke about them here and there, some of us, but others resisted severely on the ground to everything what she said. There are certain guidelines. She said clear no's to several things which are tolerated still, and I think they should not be tolerated. I'm sorry to be radical in this way, but I believe that certain things should not take place in Auroville. And once they are noticed, there has to be a notice, there has to be a warning, and then finally there has to be an action on those grounds. Yeah? And it has to clear up the atmosphere. Then I hope there will be more studying of Sri Aurobindo and the Mother. Many people even don't know about them, or even don't want to know about them. Yeah, when we started Savitri Bhavan, how many people came to our lectures, to our studies when we invited? 10? 5, 10? That was it. That was all Auroville. The rest came from ashram and Sri Aurobindo Society. So, and again, this kind of war, civil war, which happened between society and Auroville is still going on. I think here, what is happening now is that the result of that civil war still in the memory of, once civil war starts, it's very difficult to change because it's like forces grabbed people and hold them. So it's not your fault. Believe me, you did everything so beautifully, tried to bring, to convince, to meet everyone, to speak. Nothing works. Nothing works, neither this nor that. And this is Auroville today. And I hope you need to create a team around yourself. And with this team, you have to start building that Auroville which Mother wanted. And many of those, as Mother said beautifully somewhere, who do not feel that it is their place, that they don't want to be part of it, they should naturally leave. Yeah? That's what Mother wanted. Because they feel it's not for them. It's not my thing. Yeah? I don't want to live for the divine. I don't want to live for the Mother and Sri Aurobindo or for the higher ideal of unity. I have my own business, I have my own enjoyments and my family, whatever it is, country. So this would be, but they should leave kind of naturally. If you can create that atmosphere where that true Auroville will start emerging. And I see the team is with you, is the right team. Today we had a meeting with them. They spoke about of Auroville in such a highlighted manner. I would recommend you to listen to these presentations. It was really heartening. Everybody was feeling love and possibility of Auroville to emerge properly. So this is the only thing I could suggest. Mother's guidelines. Let us study them, see what she wanted. She saw things. She knows us. Yes. And somebody said, but you see, we have so many problems to solve before. And I many times think, why should we solve some problems which are not arising from the mother's guidelines? If we would follow her guidelines and we would have problems, we could solve those problems rather. I would rather solve the problems arising from following her guidelines than following somebody else's ideas. Problems will be there anyhow to solve. Yeah, but rather follow that vision of Auroville. I hope it will come true. We are all waiting for it and hoping and working, and now we want to be part of your team and help everything, whatever we can do to work together for that embodiment. Just to be normal city or normal village or eco village, or it's not enough. It's good, it's necessary, it's important, but not enough.
I would like to follow up. I have been called by the University of Hungary to be a member in the board of the doctoral thesis of one young Aurovillian, Hungarian. And she did a brilliant thesis. But I said, there is one element you have forgotten, just the spiritual dimension. And the chairman of the board of the Hungarian university said, this is true. We are, although we are a non-religious institution, we are interested by that spiritual dimension. Now, the board said, Madam, you have to rewrite a little bit your thesis for the final presentation, adding the spiritual dimension. And this is also exactly what Vladimir says. We have to insist on that spiritual dimension.
What is not spiritual when you're working from the mental state, it's more about me and the other. It's more ego, divisive. But then when we really raise our consciousness, it's more from a space of love, compassion. When you're trying to synthesize and move, you may have to be stern and be firm about certain things. Like Vladimir said, if there are certain do's and don'ts, on that we may have to be a little ruthless about certain things. Not that you need to punish people, but at least a rehab. We could in Auroville, in a separate place, have a place where you don't push things under the carpet, but you can. But sometimes this also arises from people who are again looking at it from a very mental way and saying that again it leads to spiritual ego and therefore we don't want it. But I think if it's a true raising of consciousness, it only unites us. It only makes us realize that we're all one. Although we're all in the path, I'm not saying we're all perfect and yet there, but that is where eventually it would lead us hopefully. But this was very useful, and I think this PhD student, but that is, and what Vladimir also said is so true. I mean, that is the symptom, that those are the signs that we get to see after all this. And while we saw a beautiful film this time when we started the Dream Weavers session, it was about the foresters, how they did all this work. And while deeply appreciating it, I was telling the Dream Weavers team that my dream again is that possibly 10 years from now, 15 years from now, when we all congregate or Aurovillians congregate again, we show that this was the first set of people, the pioneers who did the forests. But then all of you who are participating in this dream weaving session, all the architects of Auroville, should be the heroes of the next film, which is the next point of inflection, where Auroville is begin to, the buildings and such a beautiful city with harmony with the forests, water, nature, quiet, all of that. It can happen. So I was just imagining that the next film, we say that we are standing on the shoulder of giants, that you had people who put in all their efforts to raise the forests and they had a role, but now the second stage, as he so nicely explained it, I think this has been a most useful conversation. I've got a lot of inputs, insights from all of you. And most important, we would really depend on you as a part of this great team that Mother has tried to. She has, I think, brought all of us together on this special 150th year, trying to see how each one of us can contribute, whether it's the space of the multiversity or whether it's the space of, this whole thing of getting spiritualizing different things, Mother's guidelines. How could we come up with governance structures? So I remember Marc Luyckx emphatically saying that day, it's governance, governance, governance. And I couldn't agree more, because we have to bring in, there has to be sunshine, transparency, openness, sensitivity. There's simple things, and it can be done. If we can't do it for a population of 3,000, I mean, how can we then manage things later on? We certainly can, with a bit of technology as an aid to bring in greater parity and greater speed, efficiency, effectiveness in doing things. As I mentioned last time, I think one of the things that the governing board did, possibly the only thing, is to compile all the decisions already taken by earlier governing boards. So there is nothing new that has really come up. And actually, if you see, Mother's vision says it all. And but the one thing that the current governing board, and even if it is seen as a body which is powerful, we'd like to think that any governing board for doing Mother's work has to be powerful, has to be courageous, has to be large-hearted, and all those qualities which I think all the members possess in great quantities. I mean, having interacted with them, and there is great harmony. It's not that there is conflict and a lack of agreement. I think that there's a great deal of agreement in terms of completely being committed to the vision of mother, which is imperative and paramount. And there, they have also been on every occasion, the governing board has been meeting the community individually in the governing board meeting, inviting them, and then also collectively, because the first time that they came, the COVID protocols allowed it. So at Unity Pavilion, there was a complete gathering. So I think this apprehension that the government, given power, but that's absolutely not the way the government mechanism is looking. I have worked in traditional government departments for many years, and I would say Auroville, we're looking at it in a very different way. It's being handled in a very, very different way. But nevertheless, in the absence of being firm about certain cardinal principles that the mother has laid down, we shouldn't let it be run by certain forces which are, opposite, contrarian to the views and ideals of the mother. And if we allow that, nexus of power and authority to actually control Auroville, that is what is getting uprooted this time. And so to make it clean, to make it transparent, to make it accessible, because it's not those 10, 12 people that we often talk about as the people who represent Auroville. They do not necessarily, they may not necessarily, Auroville is about all the citizens there, all the people here, all those that live here. And so they may not really, and again, even if hypothetically the entire community were to vote for something which is against what has been laid down in mother's vision, then the question, as we said, I mean, they have to leave if some of them, as Vladimir mentioned, not in a forced manner, but then by prevailing by the rest of the community as we increase the number and try and do things that are in the spirit of what mother said, what she wanted us to do. I think automatically that will crowd out those elements which over the years may not really profess this or have belief in this, but get more and more people of goodwill and humanity, but who profess and practice what are the teachings of Mother and Sri Aurobindo. As far as the International Advisory Council interaction with the local residents of Auroville is concerned, I must also share here on record that we've had members like Sri H.P. Rama. He visited India. He is here now, and he's interacted extensively with many members of Auroville, and I think that gives him a very clear idea of what is the pulse of Auroville, not just a few people who may be sending a certain narrative. So I think that is very welcome. So also Dana, who's a good friend of Doudou, the NG, as he mentioned, Dana has been extensively interacting with a lot of people here. And also Professor David Frawley, I think someone who's been from the age of 20 deeply understanding, he's read all of the works of Sri Aurobindo, someone who's a great scholar and who has done phenomenal work. I mean, my interaction with all of them also shows, and the meetings that they're having, they're also interacting with people here, people in the ashram, people at Auroville, and the community here in their own individual capacity too. And collectively, we have had interaction, only one interaction with the governing board. It's new, of course. When you spoke of governance, Marc Luyckx, I couldn't agree more, because the entry process also, a lot of people complain. Somebody who's been a senior member of Auroville from long time, for example, Narad, you may have heard of him. He's the one who started the garden at Matra Mandir, someone who's very devoted, runs the Om choir. So I was very surprised and a little puzzled that his own entry process was being challenged by the entry committee, entry service and board. So sometimes we need to make sure that people with the right attitude to life, the right way of living, and of course, who are anchored in the teachings of Mother and Sri Aurobindo must be welcomed here. And that also, these are all come in that category of governance, improving governance, transparency, and making it more welcoming. It shouldn't be a typical government kind of organization, which of course there you do have rules, because the numbers you're dealing, it's like paddy cultivation. We're dealing with a large number of people, but here this is like rose cultivation. You're dealing with something which is far more sensitive, far more beautiful. But nevertheless, if there are some worms there, or if there's some disease which is inflicting the petals of the rose, we have to carefully do a bit of pruning of that and remove that so that the rose flower in its full majesty can bloom. And there we cannot say that, well, let nature do what it has to do.
No, thank you so much. I'm so glad that you're there. Truly speaking, you are our hope. We think about you as finally hope to move in the direction of the mother. It was like, you know, there was Kiri Joshi, that was a hope. Once I remember he brought so much, and we were so active in India. And we should not forget that Auroville is also for India, not only for the world. First of all, and most of all, also for India. So it's Indian participation is important, and governance, and everybody has to come here, learn how to be together. It's bring also some knowledge, some wisdom. We met with the president of governing board. It was so nice. It was such a surprise to hear him speak. It was brilliant.
I wanted to say that. I thought our current chairman, he knows as a child, he had memorized the entire Bhagavad Gita. Yeah. And he's been somebody, because it's also important not just to be an armchair philosopher, but somebody who's held important positions and tried to live life with those principles. And he spoke so well yesterday.
Oh, wonderful! And, yeah. We were all impressed. We thought there would be some bureaucrat or something. None of the kind, you know. He was really, and speaking from himself, you could see he was formulating thoughts. It was beautiful.